This is part 1 of the JRGP conlang circus, which covers pencil and matches submission to the contest, a language named ʟᴇsʍoʟ, since it's, well, the language of small caps. But anyway, let's start with the phonology. ʟᴇsʍoʟ's consonants are ng, r, k, g, hw, s, h, v, z, p, h, r, r, y, l, r, y, w. As you can see, a totally realistic set of consonants there. ʟᴇsʍoʟ's vowels are I, U, U, I, O, A. That's 7 vowels and all. Boring, I know. The phonotactics is simple enough. Consonant, vowel, optional consonant. Now let's look at the orthography. It's a small caps alphabet of 20 letters, with the letter names vowels being based on the place of articulation. One thing to note about the orthography is these 7 letters, which do double duty for writing glides and their vocalic counterparts. Whenever those letters are read as vowels or glides just has to be determined from context. Now it's time for the morphology. Here are the suffixes that the subject of a clause takes. Aside from the suffixes just being the vowel/glides, another thing of note is the copular and genitive rows of the table for the mood slot. They exist since ʟᴇsʍoʟ has no verb roots. The copular means to be, and the genitive means to have. The syntax and the vocabulary I will both demonstrate via examples, starting with the name of the language itself. The first word here is ʟᴇsʍoʟ, which means, well, small. But you may be asking why the initial ʟ is there. It's there since ʟ by itself is phonotactically disallowed to the initial ʟ cluster. It's a similar story with the word ʟᴇsʍ, whose root means caps, as in capital letters. Just caps by itself violates ʟᴇsʍoʟ phonotactics, so an epithetic is tacked on to the end. And then, since the word for caps is the subject of this clause, the copular indicative suffix a is applied. So the name of the language literally translates to caps are small. Anyway, the remainder of the examples will be yielded by translating the opening lines of the Lorax movie of 2012, since that's the translation text of the JRGP conlang circus. Starting with I am the Lorax, definite article is dropped since ʟᴇsʍoʟ has no articles, and the copular suffixes onto the subject. Now this is where word order comes into play, since ʟᴇsʍoʟ puts its clause subjects last, effectively making ʟᴇsʍoʟ's word order OSV. This is done so that subjects mark where clauses terminate, since ʟᴇsʍoʟ doesn't separate sentences with writing, and there can only be one subject per clause. Now it's time for ʟᴇsʍoʟization. Word roots are converted by their spelling by default, but proper nouns are the exception, since they are transliterated instead. Thus, Lorax becomes Lorax, not Lorax. That just leaves rendering the word I as y, with b being rendered as the a suffix. Up next is I speak for the trees, which has to be rephrased as I cause the audience to have the tree's words. Since ʟᴇsʍoʟ has only 2 verb semantics, this sort of rephrasing is very common. But now comes how ʟᴇsʍoʟ has no recursion, so that sentence gets split up into multiple clauses as shown here. You may notice that the object of each clause is the subject of the next clause, and this is due to how the subject of a following clause is used to mean that clause as a whole. This is called clause chaining, and since that piggybacks off of ʟᴇsʍoʟ's rephrasing, Clause chaining is also very common, and I'll walk through this chain to explain how clause chaining functions grammatically. This is a lot to explain once anyway. The rightmost clause translates to the trees have info, which along with showing how ʟᴇsʶoʟ lacks grammatical number means trees words. The middle clause literally translates to the audience has a tree, but since tree is the subject of the following clause, the tree in the middle clause refers to the entire rightmost clause. This links the middle and rightmost clause, and those two clauses together mean the audience have the tree's words. And this process repeats one step up with the leftmost clause, which literally translates to I caused the audience. And audience is also the subject of the middle clause, which carries over the meaning of the middle and rightmost clauses. Thus, the three clauses as a whole translates to I cause the audience to have the tree's words, i.e. I speak for the trees. Now with the ʟᴇsʶoʟization step, one thing I'll point out is that the words for audience and info are ʟ and yin instead of the longer ʟ and yin, since ʟ and yin are commonly occurring words in ʟᴇsʶoʟ. Where was I? Now on to and I'd like to say a few words if you please. The initial and is dropped, and from there it's rephrasing, etc. One thing to note here is the if-then morpheme as seen here, since it's an example of how clauses can have more than one object on occasion. Anyway, I've done enough grammar vocab explaining. I'll just walk through the rest of the translation uncommented. Alright, that was seriously a lot of explaining all at once. I need to take a breath. Great. Where was I? Now that the translation is done, it's time for me to read it. This is another linguistic abomination. Great. Yo ye yip ye yo ye yo yin yer yo ye yo yin yer prel yinga sedore yo real sedor yo ye yo yin yer. Where was I? Sedore yin hore wuri re yinga ye yo yin yer yin ye. Alright, that was the translation. Anyway, the next video will conclude the JRGP conlang circus 2-parter and cover the question of whatever happened to skibbity bop. So look out for that, I guess.